Hello everyone, and welcome to the next edition of the Holland Land Office Museum Artifact of the Day video series. My name is Ryan Duffy. I am the director here at the museum, and today I'm going to talk to you about one of our most famous unsolved mysteries here in Genesee County, and that is of the disappearance of William Morgan. Now, to give you a little backstory on what this event is all about, William Morgan was a local mason who lived here in Batavia and was working on various projects in the area, including some of the aqueducts across the Erie Canal. When he became involved with local Masonic chapters in Rochester and then in Leroy, where he was able to gain a membership and increase his influence in the community. However, shortly after his joining, it was made aware that he had actually not had a previous membership to a Masonic lodge in his previous lodgings, and his reputation as a heavy drinker in the community negatively affected his standing. So he was left out of the charter of a new Batavia lodge, and this angered him greatly. So he vowed to get his revenge. And to do this, he was going to write an expose of sorts that would divulge all the secrets of the Masonic chapter that were held closely to those that were members. This obviously didn't sit well with the local Masons, and they worked several angles in order to get him to stop, including bribery, threats of violence, burning of the print shop that was printing it. However, none of this seemed to deter Morgan or his printing partner David Miller, who was also an ex-Mason, until this all came to a head in September of 1826. Around September 12th or 13th, Morgan was arrested for not paying for a shirt while stationed in Canandaigua. So he was taken back to Canandaigua to be housed in the Ontario County Jail there. He spent one night there in jail until he was bailed out by three Masons, who then took him by carriage and eventually all the way across western New York to Fort Niagara. Along the way, they picked up several well-known Masons of the various areas and eventually made it to the fort. Now, he was kept at the fort, supposedly in the powder magazine, until they decided what to do with him. That is where our mystery truly begins, is we do not know the final fate of William Morgan. Several stories and theories came out about what happened, the first being that the Masons killed him and dumped him in the Niagara River. However, the three Masons that were responsible for his taking to Fort Niagara came forward and said no, they had sent him to Canada with money and told him never to return. This was seen as a way to get rid of the problem neatly and cleanly. However, most of the public refused to believe that. There was large anti-Masonic sentiments in the area. They were seen as a secret society that was very powerful and not open to the many people in society. Now, this would continue to boil over for many years, actually, and never truly died down for maybe a decade even or so. The year after Morgan's disappearance, a body washed up on shore in Lake Ontario, and a great hoopla was raised to see if it was Morgan or not. It was determined that it was not Morgan, but that did not stop certain individuals and factions from continuing to claim that it was Morgan. The leader of that faction was a man by the name of Thurlow Weed, who was a journalist, publisher, and politician from Rochester, who seemed to take great interest in the Morgan story and pushing of the belief that the Masons were evil and were an organization that should not be allowed to prosper. This grew and grew and grew until it became its own political movement, and became the first true third party in American political history, the Anti-Masonic Party, which even in 1832 was able to put out a presidential candidate for election and gain some electoral votes, though not nearly enough to even be considered in the final tally. However, this forced many of the Masonic lodges to close and many others to go underground. Before Morgan's disappearance, there was about 400 lodges in New York State. After, by about 1832, we were down to 40, so cut it down 90%. And this moved across the country and to other parts of the world even. However, eventually the hysteria subsided and Morgan sort of became a thing of the past until 1882, so nearly 50 years after his disappearance, well, more than 50 years after his disappearance, a monument was raised here in Batavia, and the Old Batavia Cemetery dedicated to Morgan as a martyr for free speech. And this brought in thousands of people for the ceremony when it was finally erected, including many from the local Masonic lodges. Now, part of the irony of this story is that for the first month after the erection, it was actually local Masons who kept guard over the monument dedicated to Morgan. And you must be thinking, why would they do that? He was someone who tried to bring them down. Well, it was more out of self-interest than anything, as they knew that if anything happened to the monument, they would be blamed. Now, that is still not where this story ends, as I'd like to tell you a little bit about William Morgan's wife, Lucinda, as her story is very interesting as well. Lucinda was born in Virginia, where she met William Morgan. Her father was a Presbyterian minister, and when Morgan came calling, he convinced her father that they should marry. He did this by claiming to be a captain in the Army during the War of 1812 and even serving with General Andrew Jackson. However, there's no definitive proof that this ever occurred. One of many of Morgan's less than truthful or easily identifiable documented instances or claims. And Lucinda was at least 20 years younger than Morgan, if not more. Now, Lucinda followed Morgan around to his various jobs before selling Batavia. They did have 2 children together, but she was often left alone with the children while Morgan was off on his work or out at the tavern. Once Morgan disappeared, Lucinda was put in the spotlight and was actually called to the inquest after the body was found on Lake Ontario, and was asked to identify the body. She could not identify the body as her husband's the first time and was still somewhat undecided the second time, even though the body had a closer resemblance. After the inquest and the hysteria died down, she married a local silversmith and eventually moved farther west to the Indiana region, where she became sort of swept up in the new religious fervor that was known as the Mormon Church. And while that was going on, she actually became one of Joseph Smith's first 3 wives. However, after Joseph Smith was killed, she left the Mormon Church and moved to Tennessee, where she actually became a nun and was last seen at the Battle of Shiloh treating wounded Union soldiers. That's 1862. So she started out as a Presbyterian. She eventually became a Mormon, and then eventually became a Catholic. It's a very interesting story to add on to this. Now, we have several images I'd like to show you just to give you a little bit better idea. Over here, we actually have 2 separate versions of what Morgan looked like during the inquest in the 1820s and 1830s. 2 very different interpretations of the same man. Over here, we have a picture of Thurlow Weed there. And then here's a picture of the monument. Now, the monument is still standing in the Old Batavia Cemetery, so you can still go see it. It's actually the tallest structure in that cemetery. Then we have a few other items I'd like to show you. The first is actually this pencil drawing of an interpretation of the William Morgan kidnapping. Now, it might be a little difficult to see, but it's not the nicest of picture for what happened to Morgan. That was done about 25 years after his disappearance, so a little bit of revisionist history maybe. And then we have a Masonic apron that was worn by a member of the Batavia Lodge around the time that Morgan disappeared. So I hope you found this video interesting on one of Genesee County's still most well-known unsolved mystery. If you'd like to know more about William Morgan, feel free to come by the museum, and we'll be happy to regale you with more parts of the tale, and you'll be able to look at these things a little closer. So I hope you enjoyed this edition of the video series, and we hope you come back for more in the future. Thank you.